This is Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you know you're having a really great dream, but you also know you can't ever get back into that dream? Now you want desperate, you wake up and you say, oh my gosh, that dream was amazing. I got to get back into that dream. And you want to fall right back asleep and be right back in that dream. I've even done it where I wake up and I know the dream was so great that I pray to God that I will fall asleep and go right back to where I left off in that dream. And of course it never happens. You doze back off, and by the time morning rolls around, you can't even remember what the dream was about. You just remember that you had a dream and it was really good. And that's about it. You might be able to see just enough of it. I mean, just a glimpse, just a flash to remind you how powerful it was. Or just thinking about the dream might make you feel good inside, but when you snap back to reality, it's gone. It's not there. It's not real. It was just a dream. Our passion for justice is like that. We all know the world's messed up. You know the world's messed up, right? I mean, goodness, it's screwed up. And yet, even though we know that this world is completely messed up, and by now we should expect it and be okay with it, we get angry and frustrated at how messed up the world is, and when bad things happen, it drives us crazy. And we feel like it should be fixed, like this world is fixable. We can do better than the world that we're living in. This is not the world as it should be. We all have that sense as well. We dream of a world where things are put right, where good actually wins and evil actually loses, like Psalm 1 said. Every so often, we catch a glimpse in our mind, just enough of this world as it could be, where things work out for good and people get along and societies function fairly and people know the right thing to do and actually do it. But then we snap back to reality and like the dream, it's all gone. But where does the dream for justice come from in the first place? N.T. Wright says, it's as though we can hear maybe not a voice itself, but the echo of a voice speaking with calm, healing authority, speaking about justice, about things being made right, about peace and hope and prosperity for all. The voice continues to echo in our imagination, our subconscious, calling us, beckoning us, luring us to think that there might actually be such a thing as justice. There might be such a thing as a world made right, even though we find it so elusive. There's a thirst for justice hardwired into human beings. I mean, if you don't believe it, test it out tomorrow. I'll put it to the test. Go to any school playground in the city limits of Albany, Georgia tomorrow. Do it. And I promise you that on that playground, you will hear this exchange happen between two of the kids, and you can finish the sentence yourself, and I'm going to ask you to. One of the kids is going to say, "That's not fair." Yeah, you can't do that. That's not fair. It's not fair. Last week, our son came home. I hate it when teachers do this. Our son came home with a toy from school for good behavior or something. I don't know what. And our daughter did not. And of course, our son has to revel in it, you know? Look what I got from school that you did not get from school. And what did our daughter scream at the top of her lungs to her brother? That's not fair! And it's not. You don't have to teach kids about fairness and unfairness. They know it. It's part of our DNA. It's woven into who we are as people from birth. But if we're born with this thirst for justice, this desire to fix a broken world, then why the heck can't we fix the broken world? It's not because we don't try. Did you know that we have around 1.2 million lawyers in the United States? Did you know that, Bo? Did you know that, Arnold? We got 1.2 million lawyers in the U.S., and all of them at least say that they're trying to uphold justice. Uphold justice. And yet, how many times has a person with enough money or enough power or enough influence gotten off scot-free, weaseled their way out of trouble? Well, the people who don't have any of those things get convicted and pay the penalty. It doesn't always happen that way, but it happens often enough that we see it and we notice it and we recognize it and say, why can't we fix that? Why, after all these years, does it keep on happening? The same thing's true in the wider world. Countries continue to invade other countries, and they absolutely get away with it. There's no response at all. There are 60 million refugees and displaced people from war worldwide today. That's 1 out of every 122 people on the globe have been forced from their homes because of conflict. That's the most since World War II. And that's interesting because it was after World War II, after Hitler and the Holocaust and all of those atrocities, that the world stood up and said, never again. Never again will we let a warlord control the world and commit these atrocities and attempt genocide on a whole group of people. Never again will this world stand for that. But then we did. Nobody stood up to stop Rwanda or the Congo or Bosnia or Darfur in Sudan. And what about here in our own country? Why can't we seem to pull our feet out of the mud of racial division and arguments? Why? I mean, you'd think in 150 years we would have made slightly more progress. But just mention anywhere Ferguson or hashtag Black Lives Matter or hashtag All Lives Matter or the Confederate battle flag and watch the tempers flare. You can watch the tempers flare in even the most level-headed, nice, calm, gentle people. Guaranteed. And again this week, another mass shooting. What the heck is going on? Why does this keep happening? Why can't we improve upon this and fix this thing that everybody knows is a problem and constantly breaks our heart? Why are we just shrugging our shoulders as if we have nothing to do, we're totally powerless, it's just going to happen? And why does it happen so much more in our country than it does anywhere else in the world? But really, we don't have to look any farther than our own noses to realize that there's something wrong. And I've said this here before, we're good people. You're good people. You are good people. I know you. You have high ethical standards, high moral standards. You have the desire to live a good life. You know what to do. You know what the right thing is to do. And some of the time, you fail to do it. You do crazy bad things. I went to the Georgia-Alabama football game yesterday. I am certain that some of the things I saw done by some people were done by professing Christians, people of faith, very high moral and ethical standards. And they didn't do it. The line between justice and injustice isn't drawn between us and them, those people and then these good people. The line between good and evil runs right down the middle of every single one of us. And now, it's not all bad news in the world. I mean, sometimes good beats evil. Sometimes brutal dictators are overthrown using nonviolent methods. Sometimes evil systems of oppression, like apartheid in South Africa, are deconstructed, again, using nonviolent methods. Sometimes serious criminals are arrested and convicted and punished for their crimes. But just when you think it's safe to relax and settle back into the dream, you snap back to reality and it's gone. Isn't this strange? How is it that we all have this sense that there is such a thing as justice, and we have a passion for it? We have this nagging desire to see the world put back right. We have this echo of a voice that rings in our minds and in our hearts and our souls, telling us that a better world is possible. Yet how is it, after millennia of human struggle, we don't seem to be any closer to that justice than anybody who came before us? What do we do with this? So far, human beings have come up with three basic responses to this echo of a voice. The first option is, there is no voice. There's no voice. I mean, we're making it up. We're making it up. It's just a projection of our childish needs and fantasies. It is just a dream. And it's time we grew up and woke up and realized that this world is all there is, and that this world is what it is. In this view, religion is seen either as irrational and silly, or, on the other end of the spectrum, extremely dangerous, because it teaches people to turn off reason and logic and turn on just blind obedience. Evil and injustice in this view are just a part of reality, so get with it. Learn to accept them, or work with them, or even use them. Or you can take option 2, which a lot of people take, that the echo of a voice is a dream from a completely different world. It's a real voice that's coming from a spiritual realm where we really belong. In this view, the reason that you feel so uncomfortable in this world is because it really isn't your world. We don't belong here. We belong in that other world, the spiritual world, where everything is right and just and peaceful. And so our job in this life is to do what we can to get in touch, to commune with that spiritual world right now, and then do our best to ensure that when we die, we go there. Or our soul goes there, because our body doesn't go anywhere. Our body just dies, and our soul lives forever in the spiritual world. Now, this view doesn't have a ton to say about the evil that happens in our present world, but it does comfort us with the thought that things will be better someday, somehow, even if there's not much we can do about it right here. And then there's the third option. And this option says that the reason we have these dreams, the reason we have a sense of a memory of an echo of a voice, is that there is somebody talking to us. And this somebody cares about our world and cares about us because they created us and the world, and they created it for a purpose. This person wants justice just like we do, wants things to be made right, wants us to be made right, and wants to rescue the world. This is the view of three of the great religious traditions. Judaism believes that God made the world and built into it a passion for justice. And so we want justice because the God who created us wants justice. Christianity believes that this same God who brought justice into the world in the first place brought that passion for justice into the world fully and finally through the work of Jesus of Nazareth. And Islam uses some Jewish and Christian stories and creates a new view where obeying God's will as revealed in the Quran is what will set the world straight and finally bring justice. Obviously, those three religions are not the same, but they all agree that the reason that we think we hear a voice is because we actually have heard one. The main thing The thing to know about Christianity as we move forward in this exploration, the main thing to know is that everything centers on Jesus in Christianity. Everything. At the core of our faith, you won't find a set of doctrines or creeds or a list of rules or rituals that have to be followed and practiced. You'll find Jesus. And we believe, Christians believe, that it's His voice that we've heard. Christians believe that Jesus embodied God's passion for justice and that what He did and what happened to Him launched God's plan of rescue in the world. Christians believe that in Jesus, God Himself shares our passion for justice and has made it real and possible in the here and now, in our real world. And so Christians everywhere give their lives and dedicate themselves to joining in God's mission here and now, where we are, to put the world back together again right now. But I can hear my atheist friend from high school. I can hear him when I say, and Christians, go out into the world and put this world back together, say to me, well, if you Christians are supposed to be putting the world back together, you're not doing a very good job, are you? What about the Crusades? Tell me about the Spanish Inquisition again. What'd you do then to non-Christians? What about clergy sexual abuse scandals? Your own leaders and professed spiritual gurus abusing children? What about all the good, solid Christians who go out and protest at the funerals of gay teenagers who have died, holding signs that say, God hates fags? You guys are doing a fantastic job. Aren't you, if you look at the objective evidence, really part of the problem, not part of the solution? And I'll tell you, when I hear people launch those sorts of criticisms at the church, my first reaction is usually to bristle. I get angry as a lifelong churcher. It's like somebody talking about my mom. I mean, you know that feeling? Like, I can complain about my mom. I can say the most awful things in the world about my own mother. But if you say something about my mom, it's on. I mean, we're going. Because then she's my favorite person in the world. Never does anything wrong. She's perfect. But the hard truth is that there are times when Christians have been part of the problem. There are times when we as a group have come off as arrogant and hypocritical, and when we have made a complete mess of the world. It's true. It's the truth. So before we go out and try to tell the world or prove to the world that Christianity is true or good or whatever, we have to admit that sometimes we've screwed up, and sometimes we've screwed up really bad. A little humble honesty from Christians can go a long way to ease the tension between believers and non-believers. The prayer Jesus taught His followers taught us. Remember, it includes the words, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. So admitting our faults and asking for forgiveness has always been a part of who we are as Christians. But also, as a Christian, I want to make it clear that when we look back at the bad things Christians have done throughout history, we can see in retrospect that these people weren't really being faithful to Jesus' vision for the world. They were mangling Jesus' vision for the world. But when people have lived out Jesus' vision, beautiful things have happened. When the slave trade was booming, many defended slavery on the grounds that they said slavery was approved in the Bible. There are slaves all through the Bible, and never once does it say that slavery is bad. But it was a group of devout Christians who got together and stood up against the way their fellow believers were distorting the biblical witness, and they made it their life's business to blot out the evil of slavery in their time. Then when slavery was dead and buried in the United States, but racial prejudice still haunted us everywhere, it was the uniquely Christian vision of Martin Luther King Jr. and others that drove him and them to peaceful but effective protest. Take an objective, logical look back through history, and you see people willing to give up their lives for justice solely because they believe and follow Jesus. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, killed by the Nazis at the end of World War II. Oscar Romero, a church leader who was assassinated in El Salvador because he was speaking out on behalf of the poor. Again, Martin Luther King Jr., obviously assassinated, lost his life. We haven't always gotten it right, but when we have, beautiful justice has come into this broken and unjust world. So, the church is extremely broken, and the church is extremely beautiful. Just like the world itself. Extremely beautiful, and yet extremely broken. Seems like a good place to stop for this morning, but a great place to start digging deeper and drilling down into this exploration of the Christian faith. From now till November 8th, I'm going to try to do my best to explain and to offer to you the Christian faith in its most basic form. And I am going to treat the question, does Christianity actually make sense, as an open question, as if it's not closed yet. We're going to ask the hard questions. And we're going to ask if the Christian way of life makes any sense at all in our world, because if Christianity is worth living, then it can stand up to the questions. And it can give good answers. Don't you want that from your faith? Don't you want that kind of faith? Now, obviously, you're sitting in a church, and I've got all the gear on. I mean, I've got crosses coming out wherever. Cross on my neck, cross on this side, cross on that side, cross behind me, crosses on everybody up here, big cross, 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 cross. I'm going to say that Christianity makes sense. That's the end point of that whole thing. Spoiler alert. I don't think I shocked anybody with that. But I'm going to, in the end, hope that you and everybody else agree with me that not only does Christianity make sense, but it does provide the answer to our deepest questions and our deepest longings, and it provides those answers in a way that no other philosophy or belief system ever has or ever could. That's where we're heading. And I hope for you who are lifelong churchgoers, that may be a little uncomfortable. But I go there because when I was already a pastor, I waited that long until I was ordained and the pastor of a church, and had been the pastor of that church for about 5 years, when I had my first crisis of the faith and said, I'm not sure I even believe what I'm saying. And yet I have to do it. Week in and week out, I'm going to stand up here and look convicted and sound convicted and say I believe all this, and I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. And so I went back and asked the questions. And what I found is when I asked the questions and I really explored it and I dug into it, I left more motivated and excited and filled up to the top and wanting to follow Jesus than I ever have before. And I hope that for every Presbyterian or Christian or whatever lifer who's sitting in the congregation, that you'll end this process renewed and rejuvenated and ready to roll, because there's plenty to be done in Albany. And if you're a skeptic and a questioner and a doubter, and that's just your nature and that's who you are, awesome. Awesome. Read the Bible. Jesus didn't sit down with the faithful elite and say, all right, tell me what we already know. I mean, he sat down with the questioners and the doubters and the skeptics and the unbelievers, and those sorts of people were his people. That's where you can dig in and get thoughtful and have good conversations. And so I hope you will bring your questions, bring your objections from whatever your perspective is. That's what this conversation is about, and it is a conversation. So here we go. Let's listen to the echo of a voice together. And we're going to start next week by listening to the echo of 3 more voices. Our desire for spirituality, our search for spirituality beyond ourselves, our desire to be in relationship with other people, and our love of beauty. I can't wait to see what we hear. Amen.